Most people over 50 wake up thinking they're starting fresh, but biologically, that's not what's happening. When you open your eyes in the morning, your body is often already behind. Running on low cellular energy, carrying residual inflammation from the day before, and operating with repair systems that didn't fully complete their job overnight. Inside your body, something very quiet but very important is happening. Your cells are supposed to repair damage while you sleep. Tiny structures called mitochondria, your cellular power plants, should be restoring energy. Stem cells, which act like your internal repair crew, should be activating, replacing worn-out cells, maintaining tissue health. But for many people over 50, that system becomes less efficient. Not dramatically, subtly. You feel it as slower recovery, a little more stiffness, brain fog that lingers longer than it used to, cuts that take days longer to heal, energy that never quite feels fully restored. It's not aging overnight, it's accumulation. And here's the part most people don't realize. What I'm about to show you is that your body already has a built-in switch, and it's triggered in the first hour after you wake up. But almost everyone unknowingly blocks it, every single morning. And once you understand this, you won't look at your mornings the same way again. I'm Dr. Christal. I'm a physician, and for the past decade, I've focused my work on cellular aging, metabolic health, and how the body repairs itself over time. Most of the people I see are over 40. They're not necessarily sick in the traditional sense, but they're dealing with something very real. Persistent fatigue, slower recovery, subtle cognitive decline, weight that becomes harder to manage, and a general sense that their body just isn't responding the way it used to. What I've noticed over and over again is that many of these patients are doing a lot of things right. They're taking supplements, experimenting with diets, trying to stay active. Some are extremely disciplined, but despite all that effort, they're not getting the results they expect. And for a long time, that didn't make sense. Until I started looking more closely at timing. There was a moment in my clinical work where it became very clear to me. It wasn't just what my patients were doing, it was when and how they were doing it. The body doesn't operate in a constant state, it runs on rhythms. Circadian biology, cellular signaling pathways, hormone fluctuations, these systems are highly time sensitive. And once I began aligning simple interventions with those natural biological windows, I started seeing something different. Energy improved, recovery changed, even markers of metabolic health began to shift. This isn't a trend, and it's not based on hype. It's grounded in how your biology is designed to function. Most people grow up believing a very simple model of the body. You eat food, and that gives you energy. You sleep, and your body recovers. And aging, well, that's just time passing. It sounds logical. It feels intuitive. But biologically, that's not actually how the body works, because your body doesn't operate based on inputs alone. It operates on signals. Food is not just calories, it's information. Sleep is not just rest, it's a window of opportunity. And recovery is not automatic, it's conditional. Your body is constantly asking questions. Quietly, in the background, at the level of your cells. Is this an environment where we should conserve energy? Or is this an environment where we can invest energy into repair? And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Because your body doesn't repair itself just because you slept. It repairs itself when it receives the right biological signals that tell it it's safe and necessary to do so. This is where mornings become incredibly important. The first hour after you wake up is not just the beginning of your day, it's a command window for your biology. Hormones are shifting, cortisol is naturally rising, cellular pathways are becoming more sensitive to input. Your brain and body are essentially deciding how to allocate energy for the next 24 hours. And here's where the contradiction comes in. Many of the habits people believe are healthy first thing in the morning, eating immediately, staying indoors, away from natural light, remaining sedentary, can actually send a very specific message to the body. They signal that energy is already abundant, that there's no urgency to repair deeply, that survival is not a concern. So the body stays in a kind of maintenance mode, functional, but not regenerative. On the other hand, there are very specific signals, simple, natural triggers that tell the body something entirely different. They shift internal pathways. They activate processes linked to mitochondrial efficiency, cellular cleanup, even stem cell activity. And when those signals are combined in the right way, something very interesting happens. The body flips out of maintenance mode and into regeneration mode. To understand what's really happening in the body, we need to zoom out for a moment and look at the core systems that control energy, repair, and aging itself. First is something we can think of as the energy sensing system. Every cell in your body has a kind of internal fuel gauge. It's constantly monitoring how much energy is available and how much is being used. When energy is low, the body shifts into conservation mode. When energy is abundant and signals are favorable, it allows for repair and rebuilding. This ability to switch states is what we call metabolic flexibility, and it becomes less responsive with age. Then there's your circadian clock. This is your internal 24-hour timing system. It doesn't just tell you when to sleep and wake, it regulates hormones, body temperature, digestion, immune activity, and even cellular repair. Morning is one of its most important phases. It's like a biological reset signal that sets the tone for the entire day. Inside your cells, you also have mitochondria. These are your microscopic power plants. They take nutrients and oxygen and convert them into usable energy. What we often think of as aging isn't simply a loss of cells. It's a gradual decline in how efficiently these mitochondria produce energy. The system is still there, but it becomes less responsive, less flexible, and more easily overwhelmed. And then there are stem cell niches. Stem cells are often misunderstood. They don't simply disappear with age. In many cases, they remain present but inactive. They're like a repair crew that's been called off duty. To wake them up, they require very specific biological signals: timing, environment, and metabolic cues. If you imagine your body as a city, it becomes easier to see how these systems interact. The mitochondria are the power grid supplying energy. The stem cells are the repair crews maintaining infrastructure. And the circadian rhythm is the central clock tower coordinating everything. The important insight is this: these systems don't operate in isolation. They respond together, and they respond most powerfully during specific windows, especially in the morning, when the body is most sensitive to external signals that can either reinforce decline or initiate regeneration. To really understand what happens when the body shifts into a regenerative state, we have to look at the deeper molecular layers. And what's fascinating is that these mechanisms don't act independently. They function like a coordinated stack, each one supporting the next. The first layer is AMPK activation. AMPK is often described as the body's metabolic switch. It turns on when energy levels are low, such as during fasting or early in the morning before food intake. In that state, the body shifts away from storage and toward repair. Instead of building and accumulating, it starts conserving, cleaning, and restoring. The important point is that this switch becomes less sensitive over time, especially in people who are constantly in a fed state. Next is PGC1 alpha, often called the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis. When activated, especially through mild energy demand like early movement or light exposure, it signals the creation of new mitochondria. Not just repair of old ones, but actual production of fresh, more efficient energy-producing structures. This is how the body upgrades its internal power system. Then we have mitophagy. This is the cleanup process. Damaged or inefficient mitochondria are identified and removed. You can think of it like clearing out broken machines from a factory floor so the entire system can run more smoothly. Without this step, dysfunctional mitochondria accumulate and create oxidative stress, which accelerates cellular aging. Another key layer involves NAD+ and sirtuins. NAD+ levels naturally rise in fasting states and early circadian phases. This molecule is essential for activating sirtuins like SIRT1 and SIRT3, which are closely linked to DNA repair, inflammation control, and overall cellular resilience. When NAD+ is low, these repair systems become sluggish. And finally, stem cell activation signals. Stem cells don't simply turn on randomly. They respond to very specific metabolic and circadian cues. It's not about forcing them into action. It's about creating the right internal environment that gives them permission to activate and begin repair work. When you look at all of this together, something important becomes clear. These aren't separate effects happening in isolation. They form a coordinated biological cascade, where one signal amplifies the next, guiding the body from energy conservation into deep cellular regeneration. Let me share a couple of real clinical patterns I've seen, because this is usually where things start to make practical sense for people. One of my patients was a 52-year-old man. He came in mainly complaining of constant fatigue, gradual weight gain around the midsection, and the feeling that he just wasn't recovering from exercise or even normal daily stress the way he used to. When we looked at his routine, nothing was extreme, but it was consistent in a way that worked against his biology. He would wake up, immediately eat breakfast, stay indoors scrolling on his phone, and barely move for the first couple of hours of the day. We didn't introduce anything complicated. The first changes were simple: delaying his first meal by a few hours, going for a short morning walk outside, and hydrating properly before anything else. Within a few weeks, he started reporting something interesting. Not dramatic transformation, but a steady return of mental clarity in the mornings, less afternoon crash, and a noticeable improvement in how quickly he recovered after activity. Another case was a 61-year-old woman who struggled more with sleep quality and morning stiffness, especially in her joints. She described waking up feeling like her body never fully reset overnight. For her, we focused on consistent morning light exposure and creating a slightly longer fasting window overnight without changing her overall diet significantly. Over time, not days, but weeks, she began noticing smoother mobility in the mornings and a more stable sense of recovery after sleep. It wasn't that symptoms disappeared, but the intensity and persistence gradually shifted. What stood out in both cases wasn't a single intervention. It was the alignment of very simple morning signals with the body's natural repair timing. When we look at the scientific literature, what we see is a consistent pattern across several different fields of research, even though they don't always start from the same question. In circadian biology, for example, studies from major universities over the past decade have shown how strongly light exposure in the morning influences cortisol rhythm, alertness, and downstream metabolic signaling. That early light signal isn't just about waking up, it helps synchronize internal clocks across nearly every tissue in the body. In fasting research, particularly from metabolic research centers, there's strong evidence that early periods without food intake can activate AMPK pathways. This is closely linked with improved metabolic switching, where the body becomes more efficient at moving between energy use and energy repair states. At the same time, NAD+ levels tend to rise in these fasting windows, which is important because NAD+ is a required cofactor for many repair processes. Mitochondrial research adds another layer. Studies consistently show that even modest physical activity, especially when aligned with circadian timing, can activate PGC1 alpha, the key regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis. This is essentially how cells signal the production of new, more efficient mitochondria. And in longevity research, particularly around sirtuin pathways, there is growing evidence that these systems respond to metabolic stress signals like fasting and controlled energy demand. Sirtuins are closely tied to DNA repair, inflammation regulation, and overall cellular resilience. Taken together, across different institutions and research models, a common theme emerges. The body's repair systems are highly time-dependent, and morning biological signals play a disproportionately important role in activating them. So if we translate all of this into something practical, it becomes much simpler than most people expect. A typical morning, biologically speaking, starts the moment you wake up, and what you do in that first hour has a disproportionate influence on how your metabolism and repair systems behave for the rest of the day. One of the first things I usually guide patients toward is not rushing into food immediately upon waking. Instead, giving the body a short fasting window allows those internal signaling pathways, like AMPK and NAD+ related systems, to remain active a little longer. It's not about restriction, it's about timing. The next step is hydration. Overnight, the body loses fluid through respiration and basic metabolic processes, so replenishing water early supports circulation and cellular function. In some cases, a gentle addition of electrolytes can help, especially in older adults who are more sensitive to subtle dehydration. Within the first 30 to 60 minutes, getting natural sunlight exposure becomes important. Not artificial light, but actual daylight. This is one of the strongest circadian signals you can give the body. It helps reset internal clocks and coordinates hormonal rhythms that influence energy and repair. Adding light movement at the same time, something as simple as walking or gentle stretching, creates another layer of signaling. You're essentially telling the body, energy demand is active, but not stressful. And this is where the synergy matters. Fasting, natural light, and light movement together create a combined biological message that is much stronger than any one of them alone. The body interprets this as a clear signal to shift toward metabolic efficiency and cellular maintenance balance. Some people also benefit from supportive nutrients that assist mitochondrial function, but that's secondary. The foundation is always timing and signals first. Where things tend to go wrong is when mornings start with immediate eating, staying indoors under artificial lighting, or jumping straight into high-intensity stress or stimulation. Those patterns can blunt the very signaling cascade we're trying to activate. It's not about doing more, it's about aligning better. When we talk about changes in cellular energy, metabolism, and repair systems, it's important to be honest about timing. The body doesn't reorganize itself overnight. It responds gradually, as different signaling pathways begin to shift back into alignment. In the first few days, most people notice very subtle changes. It's not dramatic weight loss or sudden transformation. It's more internal than that. A slightly clearer sense of alertness in the morning, a bit less of that heavy, foggy feeling when waking up. Some people describe it as their mind starting faster, even if their sleep hasn't changed much yet. These early shifts are usually tied to improved circadian signaling and early metabolic responsiveness. After about 2 to 3 weeks, the changes tend to become more noticeable. Energy feels more stable across the day instead of coming in peaks and crashes. There's often improved recovery after physical or mental effort. People might notice they don't feel as drained in the afternoon, and their mornings begin to feel more predictable and steady. By 6 to 8 weeks, we start seeing deeper adaptation. This is where mitochondrial efficiency, hormonal rhythm, and metabolic flexibility begin to show more consistent improvement. Many people describe a sense of lighter energy, not in a superficial way, but in how the body handles stress and restores itself afterward. Sleep quality often feels more restorative during this stage as well. It's important to understand that none of this is instant. What we're really talking about is biological alignment. You're not forcing the body into something new, you're gradually restoring signals it already understands, but may have lost sensitivity to over time. And when those signals return consistently, the body doesn't just respond temporarily, it begins to reorganize itself around them. Before anyone tries to apply these ideas more aggressively, it's important to add some necessary balance here. Because while circadian alignment, fasting windows, and morning signaling can be beneficial in many people, they are not universally appropriate in the same way for everyone. For example, individuals with diabetes, especially those on glucose-lowering medication, need to be very careful with any form of extended fasting or major shifts in meal timing. The same applies to people who are underweight, recovering from illness, or dealing with certain hormonal or metabolic conditions where energy availability is already limited. In these cases, reducing intake or extending fasting windows too quickly can create more stress than benefit. And that's a key point many people miss. The goal here is not to push the body into strain. It's not about forcing biology into extremes. It's about restoring intelligent signaling in a way the body can adapt to safely. In clinical practice, I always emphasize gradual adjustment. Even small changes, like a slightly delayed breakfast, a short walk in the morning light, or improving sleep consistency, can be enough to begin shifting these pathways over time. The body responds best when it feels stable, not shocked. Just as important is learning to listen to your own physiological feedback. Things like persistent dizziness, fatigue that worsens instead of improves, or disrupted sleep are signals that something may be off and needs to be adjusted rather than pushed further. So the framework is not rigid, it's adaptive. Because at its core, this is not about stress or deprivation. It's about intelligent signaling, helping the body recognize the right conditions to restore balance, energy, and repair capacity in a sustainable way. When we step back and look at everything together, the picture becomes much simpler than most people expect. Aging is often described as damage accumulation. And while that's partially true, it's not the full story. A more accurate way to think about it is that aging is also a gradual loss of signaling, your body's ability to communicate clearly with itself. The systems are still there, Stem cells are not gone. In most cases, they are still present in their niches, still capable of repair, but they're quiet. They're waiting for the right combination of cues to activate again. Mitochondria are not simply failing in a linear sense either. They are often understimulated, less frequently challenged, and less efficiently turned over. When the signals for renewal and cleanup become weaker, the system gradually becomes less responsive. And that's really the central insight here. Your body already knows how to repair itself. It doesn't need to learn a new process. It just needs the right message at the right time. This is where the morning becomes so important. It is not just the beginning of your day, it functions like a control center for biological instruction. A narrow window where light, movement, fasting state, and hormonal shifts are all communicating with your cells at once. And what's powerful is that small signals during this window can create disproportionately large biological effects over time. Not because they are extreme, but because they are timed correctly. A short exposure to natural light, a brief period of fasting, gentle movement. These are not dramatic interventions individually, but together they shape the direction your metabolism and repair systems take for the entire day. So instead of thinking in terms of forcing the body to change, it becomes more accurate to think in terms of reminding it. Because often the machinery is still there, it's just waiting for the right signal to turn back on. So if you take anything from this, let it be this simple shift in perspective. Your mornings are not just a routine, they are a biological conversation with your body. Every choice you make in that first hour is either reinforcing how your system has been operating for years or gently guiding it back towards something more balanced and efficient. You don't need to get it perfect. In fact, trying to do everything at once often becomes counterproductive. What matters far more is consistency. Small signals, repeated daily, tend to reshape physiology far more effectively than occasional intense effort. Maybe for the next few days, just observe your mornings a little differently. Notice when you eat. Notice how much natural light you're getting. Notice whether your body feels more awake or still stuck in that overnight heaviness. And if it resonates with you, try making 1 or 2 gentle adjustments. Not as a strict protocol, but as an experiment in how your body responds when timing begins to work with you instead of against you. I'd be genuinely interested to hear what you notice. Sometimes the most useful insights come not from theory, but from lived experience. Small changes that reveal how responsive the body still is when given the right conditions.